Thank you. Your Excellency and my dear sister and friend, Jessica Alupo, Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, the Right Honorable Dr. Rukana Rugunda, Patron of the Guild's President's Leadership Academy, a man who I had the pleasure to serve under when I was Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya and he was Prime Minister of Uganda. Mzee wetu, Mzee Ruchikaire, I hope this one-year-old has not let you down. We are still struggling and moving on. The Vice Chancellor of this esteemed facility, Makerere University, Guild presidents, student leaders from across our East Africa region, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say what an honor it is to stand here to address this very distinguished gathering of young leaders from across the East African region. I myself are extremely happy to be here in this great city of Kampala, which I consider to be my home away from home. And from here, all of you who have come from different parts of East Africa, as you sit atop this Makerere Hill, all I can say is that that is reminiscent and a sight that has been shared by many, many over the years. Allow me at the very onset to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the Guild President's Leadership Academy for organizing this summit, and also to Makerere University, through you, Vice Chancellor, for hosting us at this esteemed institution, which, as you reminded us, is the foundation of East African higher education. All of us are children of Makerere, and we are happy and proud to be. And we're also happy to see that Makerere continues to serve as the furnace upon whose flames the ideologies of many African leaders in the past, and most definitely in the future, will continue to be forged. So, ladies and gentlemen, getting straight to the point, to state that today we are living in a tumultuous time would be somewhat of an understatement. The traditional world order that we have become accustomed to is being appended before our very eyes. The forces of nationalistic politics are fast eroding the foundations of multilateral institutional frameworks that have formed the substructure of global geopolitics for many decades. From the uncertain policies emanating from Washington, D.C., that are reshaping the rules of global trade, to the all-consuming conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza that risk becoming the nuclei for wider regional conflicts, we are indeed witnessing a watershed moment in the history of our world. As an African leader, I view these developments from a somewhat broader context beyond the uncertainty of growing global tensions. I recognize that we, as Africans, are simultaneously besieged by disruption chaos, and confusion on the one end, but also, I believe, immense opportunity and promise of prosperity on the other end. To illustrate further on this statement that seems contradictory on the face of it, I will draw from two examples that some of you may find familiar, given the fact that it was mentioned here also.
Your Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, the fourth president of the...
Oh, okay. The first is the recent suspension of USAID funding, primarily directed at developing nations, and the second is a glimpse at the direction that European politics is taking and its implications on Africa. Whereas the stoppage of US-led international development aid has had an immediate and far-reaching implications on our fragile healthcare systems, I believe it has also been a much-needed wake-up call to our leaders and policymakers, that they should recognize that our economies have become woefully dependent on the charity of foreign governments, and it is now the time to lay the foundation for self-sufficiency. The sunset of USAID has forced a level of economic policy introspection unseen in Africa for decades. And I believe the situation calls for a serious rethink in our development priorities as African governments. Difficult and unfamiliar choices will have to be made going forward. Our governments across the continent must weigh whether buying bullets to restock their armories is better than use of scarce resources for producing vaccines and mosquito nets needed to protect our infants from disease. Prioritization of expenditure in the absence of African-financed subsidies in the health sector and in the education sector means that more attention is going to be paid by our citizens to the way governments handle their finances. And this will inevitably translate into demands for greater public participation and transparency in public financial management. The second I mentioned is what we are seeing in Western Europe with each passing year. More and more governments are leaning further and further to the right. The election of populist, nationalist administrations has been catalyzed by various factors. Among them, the huge cost of living attributed to the side effects of global shocks, and the scramble for stretched social services. Services that must be shared with millions of migrants flowing in from Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and significantly from Africa. This right-leaning scenario that we see in Europe has some near-term implications for Africa. The truth of the matter is, the Europeans no longer want to see our immigrant boats laden with our young men and women landing on their shores. They are currently busy enacting laws to ensure that we never set foot in their countries, to partake in their resources without proper immigration documents. Our young people will soon have nowhere left to escape, nowhere to run away from the wars and poverty that define much of our continent's present realities. So what? With nowhere to go but home, with no one to turn to but themselves, I believe that our young people, and that is you, will eventually wake up to the fact that there is no global rescue mission coming to save you. We must save ourselves from a future of despair. You, our young people, will have to play your part in reshaping the destinies of our countries of birth, and you will help us realize that this is the moment for each and every one of you to step onto the stage. Your time has come. In both these examples that I have drawn from, there is a clear illustration of the type of challenges that define the moment that we are currently living in. Conversely, the same examples also provide the perfect segue for us to explore the opportunities that exist for a new generation of young leaders. A generation who will chart a better path for Africa, and I do believe that is what has brought us together this morning. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we seek to navigate the challenges of our time, let us take a moment to reflect on three questions that I believe will serve to frame the context of our discussion, and some of them actually I have already witnessed being raised here today. And the first of these is, what does it mean to be a young African in a world where developed nations are focusing inward, prioritizing their national interests over their global responsibilities? The second is, what does it mean to be a young African living on a continent that has over 35 non-international armed conflicts taking place, with millions facing displacement and food insecurity as a result? And lastly, what does it mean to be a young African competing for limited economic opportunities with close to 1 billion other young people across our continent? These, my friends, are existential questions for you, the young people of Africa, and they cannot be easily answered without a deeper understanding of how we arrived at this point. With the exception of Ethiopia, most of the rest of Africa has a dark colonial past that has, in a large part, been shaped, and has for the large part, shaped by the thinking of post-independence generations. When the wave of liberation swept across Africa in the early 1960s, late 1950s, it heralded new beginnings for all of us, as we have heard from our fathers here. It was an opportunity to govern ourselves and to determine our priorities. As our leaders sought to dismantle the vestiges of colonialism, there was widespread optimism that our newly independent states would create the environment for their citizens to thrive. You heard how, even in East Africa, they wanted from day one to form a federation right from the onset. And for a time, we lived the dream and savored the early wins of being our own masters. However, unfortunately, over time, instead of dismantling the colonial legacy, we inherited it and customized it even further to create a new African style of leadership, a style that leaned heavily on patronage, ethnic and religious mobilization, elitism and favoritism, the result of which was a quick deterioration in national cohesion, the entrenchment of corruption as an evil that led to the stagnation of our economies. There is a story President Museveni likes to tell of a leader, I don't like mentioning names, but one of our forefathers, who, when being questioned as to why he didn't want this federation to proceed, couldn't give a good explanation. But another Ugandan parliamentarian challenged him and said, the problem is that you want to be a big fish in a little pond so that you can sit on all the other little fish. And unfortunately, that was the mentality that resulted in many a problem on this continent. These weaknesses exposed our underbellies and left us vulnerable once again to the whims of foreign powers. They have exposed these vulnerabilities in our political constructs to manipulate our development trajectory as Africans, and unfortunately we are almost back to square one. This, however, is a story of years gone by. It does not have to be how our future will evolve. Now that you have an insight as to how we got here, I believe let us focus our attention on how to get out of this quandary that we find ourselves in. And we begin this by taking the first question: what does it mean today to be a young African in a world where developed nations are focused inward, prioritizing their national interests? Ladies and gentlemen, having served as president, I appreciate fully the pressure that elected leaders face on a daily basis. They have to be in tune with the mood and desires of their voting public and be seen to be directing the government's energies towards addressing these demands. Can we therefore really blame the governments of developed nations for responding to their needs, to the needs of their own citizens above all others? We can't. That is what they do. So us as well, it is time for us to also stop lamenting about the inward-looking policies of faraway democracies and nations. And we should instead be asking ourselves, why is it that we as Africans don't prioritize our own interests above all else? The duty of a responsible government is to discharge its primary mandate of serving the interests of its citizens. In many nations across Africa, we have somehow managed to invert the order of this relationship. Instead, the citizens are subservient to the government and are compelled to adjust their behavior in order to promote the interests of the state, which in many instances are almost indistinguishable from personal interests. So you, as young African leaders, you know well as I do that this situation is untenable. The economic opportunities you desire in order to live your best lives can only be created by governments that are designed to serve the citizens and not governments whose only reason for existence is to exploit, manipulate, and drain the resources of their countries and citizens for personal good. That is what is happening in all these conflicts you see around here. Don't be cheated there about anything else. Ni pesa. Yeah? People are killing each other. People are allowing their children to be killed. People are causing all sorts of problems, claiming this and claiming that and claiming the other. It's all about their pockets. Yeah? And that's why when they are finished destroying their countries, you see them board planes and you never hear from them again, but you never see your money again, and you are left licking your wounds. You must stop that. Yeah? Allow me to remind you once again that there is nobody coming to our rescue, and in a world that is becoming more insular, there will soon be nowhere to run. So let us fix our continent. It is therefore my considered submission that the answer to our first question is that you as young leaders must recognize that this is your independence moment and that you are officially the freedom fighters of this era. You are the last line of defense in the battle to rescue the heart and soul of Africa for the sake of future generations. And your mission is to embrace your civic duty and choose governments that are responsive to your needs. Young leaders in East Africa, ladies and gentlemen, let me now turn to the second question. What does it mean to be a young African living in a continent that has over 35 non-international armed conflicts taking place, with millions facing displacement and food insecurity? Today in Africa, from the Sahel to the Great Lakes to the Horn, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea, over 500 million of your colleagues and counterparts are caught up in some type of armed conflict or political strife. Inevitably, these are impacting mostly women, children, and the young people. I talked earlier about how the colonial legacy was replaced in many countries by a style of leadership that draws its strength from creating and exploiting societal fissures along religious, racial, or ethnic lines as a pretext for the accumulation of economic and political power by a select few. I hold the view that this is never going to be a stable method of governance for the long term for a number of basic reasons. Firstly, the corruption that arises from it only serves to undermine public interest and diverts resources from essential services, sowing the seeds of resentment among the populace. Secondly, the politics of ethnicity, favoritism, and patronage at the expense of meritocracy are the quickest ways in which to erode national unity. Thirdly, personalization of the state means that institutions designed to safeguard continuity of governments are weakened. In all these three instances, you end up with a large section of the population that are physically resident within the borders of a country, but are psychologically and emotionally disengaged. That is what you call apathy. And I heard you guys trying to talk here about apathy. That is what causes apathy, because the people you want to lead are disengaged from yourselves. And I just want to refer, you know, I was listening very carefully to everything that was going and being said. And, you know, I heard somebody, what do we do about, you know, our voters who are asking us for money, They're asking us for money. They're asking you for money because you, as a leader, have failed. It is, no matter how many laws you put in place to stop, oh, we are going to cap how much money is going to be given, somebody will still give them money, law or no law. The problem is to fix the issue. Because your primary responsibility as a member of parliament, my friend, is to represent your people, is to oversight the government of the day. All right? Now, if you have failed in your responsibility of representing your people to ensure that the government of the day has given them their ambulance, that has given them their health center, has given them their school and water, why are you then surprised when the Mwananchi comes to you and says, I want this ambulance and you are supposed to bring it to me? But he's not asking it from you. He's asking it from you because you have failed in your duty to represent. And that is why we are saying we want leaders of integrity who will go and stand for what their people have sent them to parliament to do. You were sent to parliament to go and speak on behalf of your people, not to speak on behalf of your stomach, my friend. This is the problem we're having here. And we must be honest with each other. Yeah? So if you are to be leaders, you must be led by service to your people, not service to your stomach. That is the reason you seek leadership. Yeah? That is why, and that is how you will change this country That is how you will change East Africa. That is how you will change Africa. That is how you will get the world to recognize you. That is how you will get the world to respect you. That is how we will stop being beggars. That is how your children will have hope instead of going to die in some sea there, crossing to Europe to look for nothing. Na hakuna kitu huko. Yeah? Yeah? Unawacha matoke hapa ati uende ukakule Burger King na McDonald's kule. Sasa who is the fool? Your matoke here fresh, wonderful and beautiful, to go and line up huko ukula burger ambaye inakunonesha tumbo tu na hakuna kitu inakufanya. Oh. Ama ni namna gani? Yes, that is the way. So, let me continue. I'm sorry. Yeah. In all three instances, you end up, like I said, with a large section of the population that is physically resident within the borders of a country, but is psychologically and emotionally disengaged. A people excluded from the role of nation building because they feel like they are outsiders or bystanders in their own country. At the root of almost every crisis in our part of the world, the common denominator is the absence of inclusive, responsive leadership. Further, I believe it is essential for you as young leaders to appreciate the fact that these fissure lines that I speak about are visible beyond our continent. Others can see these fissures. They are looking at us through their ambassadors and their high commissioners. They are looking at us. You think wamekuja hapa ati ku encourage bilateral. Wamekuja hapa kujua how much more can we get. Yeah? Right? These fissures, they are visible to them. And as such, they have made our continent fair game for destructive proxy wars sponsored by nations with significant economic and military strength. These actors have the strategic intent of using the chaos and confusion perpetrated by self-serving leaders across our human capital to access our human capital, our mineral wealth, our agricultural potential, to grow their own economies at our own expense. To compound this further, society is experiencing these levels of internal discontent, are susceptible to an even more sinister type of enemy, and that is violent extremism. Organizations hell-bent on disseminating and entrenching their misguided ideologies through violence. And we know, you see in Kenya we have Al-Shabaab, here you have ADF causing problems all across the border, disturbing citizens, not allowing people to move forward. But why are these groups able to do that? They're able to do that because there is somehow feeling that there is a vacuum which they want to come here and push, because we have also failed in trying to have this inclusive society. If we were one, these would not be problems. Al-Shabaab problem, ADF problem would be a problem of East Africa, not a problem of individual countries. You don't have the capacity. These people have no color. You know, they have no tribe. They just have an ideology which is warped. So today they will bomb you in Kampala, tomorrow they'll be bombing me in Kiambu, or they'll be bombing somebody else in Dar es Salaam. But if we were together, we are able to fight and to confront these issues while at the same time working towards the prosperity of our nations. So, the peace and security crisis that looms over many parts of our continent is a clear and present danger to Africa's long-term viability as a going concern. And if we don't find ways to resolve these conflicts soon, we may have generations of young people wiped out as cannon fodder, and with them, any prospect of uplifting the lives of our people. So you millennials and Gen Zs and all of us, we are also told we are young people by the Vice President. I agree, even me, I'm still young. So, you're told you're as young as you feel. Me, I feel young. So, but anyway, there are those who are millennials. You have your Gen Zs here as well. Allow me to state this point once more for emphasis. Nobody outside of Africa is coming to save you. Do not have any misguided thought that there's anybody who is coming to save you. In the words of Eldridge Cleaver, an American writer and civil rights activist, you are either going to be part of the solution or you are part of the problem. This message holds true today as it did decades ago at the height of America's civil rights movement. The good news also, however, I believe, is that I have witnessed such a pivotal moment to effect change. All the elements necessary to bring about lasting and irreversible change are currently within your grasp as young people. And why, you say, do I say this? And let me just say, for starters, again, as has been mentioned, the demographics, first and foremost, are in your favor. The median age across our African continent in 2025 is 19.3 years, against a global median of 30.4 years. This means that over 65% of all Africans are below the age of 25. You have the numbers, you have the time, you have the energy to get involved and stay involved in governance discussions until you effect the change you wish to see. You have the time. Our elder, Mzee here, told us that when he stood here starting his journey, he was 23 years old. He's now 88, going 89, still fighting. Some of you have not even touched 23, and you are lamenting. My friend, this is a call to action. Get up and start moving. This is your call to action. Now. Now is the time. Now. Not tomorrow, not the day after, not after you graduate. No. Now is the time. Now. So, like I say, you have the numbers, you have the time, and you have the energy to get involved and stay involved in governance discussions until you effect the change you want to see. Furthermore, you are also the beneficiaries of years of investment in education and digital connectivity. You have the knowledge. You are, in essence, the first children of that knowledge economy, the true digital natives of Africa. The democratization of access to information through the internet means that very few secrets are left. Very, very few. Very, very few secrets. The asymmetry of information in favor of government has always been a tool to manage the perception of populations. This is no longer the case. You know what we know. In many cases, you know it better because you have understood how to leverage the essential tools of today, such as artificial intelligence and the power of social media. Me, when I go and make a small statement somewhere, I think I'll be hidden myself in the middle of the bush. By the time I am getting home for lunch with my wife, she's asking me, what were you doing talking out there? How do you know where I was? It's already, you young people have already pressed these buttons and it's all over. He was there and he said this. So we are living in a very dangerous time. Be very careful, especially of those of you who have two girlfriends. Mujichunge sana. I hear these days they can even follow you, you know. She can just say, I don't know, follow me or track me, I don't know what. And you've said you've gone to study in, I don't know, the library, and she finds you in some. Be very careful. Things are very dangerous these days. So lastly on this point is that over the last 60 years or so, as our countries have developed, so have the living and migration patterns of our citizens. And this is a wonderful fact. Millions of families have moved from rural towns to large urban settings in search of opportunity and better life. This migration has created a new generation of non-ethnically homogeneous populations across the country. The result, millions of young people born out of intermarriages and unshackled by the negative weight of ethnic identity are slowly becoming the majority. As I alluded to you earlier in my speech, never before have there been such ideal conditions to break loose from the generational curse of our forefathers and of some of us that saw us remain chained to ethnic and cultural differences as a way to distribute wealth and political power. Finally, let us tackle the last one that I posed to you. What does it mean to be a young African competing for limited economic opportunities with close to 1 billion other young Africans? And I believe we need to see our strength in numbers as Africans. And in spite of having the world's youngest population and a market size of over 1.5 billion people, Africa still accounts for less than 2.5% of global trade. We have designed our trade corridors to favor extraction as opposed to intra-Africa trade, meaning that today it is easier for a Kenyan or a Ugandan to sell tomatoes and avocados to the European Union than it is to supply our brethren in West Africa. Similarly, unfortunately, it is easier for an American or European passport holder to visit African countries visa-free than it is for an African to traverse their own continent. If we are to create economic opportunities for our youth, we need to remove the barriers that prevent the actualization of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, of the East African Protocol on Trade. We need to remove every single barrier. We must stop being paranoid about each other and give preferential treatments to African passport holders to visit and to do business anywhere on their continent. We must design our transport and logistics infrastructure to point inward to facilitate more cross-border trade by allowing for the affordable and efficient movement of people, goods, and services across our continent. And closer to home, we need to reflect on our education curricula. Are we training our children for the jobs of the future? The advancements in technology have rendered many traditional careers irrelevant, yet we are still spending millions of dollars every year encouraging our children to pursue courses that will lead them to nowhere. Today, the world needs doers, people who can get things done. This is the preference of functionality over form, as one of you here had mentioned. We need functionality. So I would summarize my response to the third question as follows. One, we must increase our share of global trade as Africans by deliberately focusing on intra-Africa trade or East African trade. Two, we need to evolve our education system to encourage our youth to be entrepreneurial and tailor our curricula to be fit for purpose in the knowledge economy. And three, we need to actively influence the adoption of domestic policies on macroeconomic management that create a conducive environment for the private sector to thrive. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've always been passionate about the role of our youth in leadership, and it is a subject that I can talk about for hours on end. However, I'm cognizant that today we are limited in time to exchange these ideas. So I would just like to touch on some perspectives that I have garnered from my 30 years or so in active politics and my 10 years as President of the Republic of Kenya. And these perspectives delve into the basics of leadership and what I feel are the irreducible minimums that we must all aspire to as leaders in the new world that we are navigating. The first of these is integrity and leadership. And this is not merely a moral idea, it is a practical necessity. It involves a conviction to do right when it is costly, and to serve when it is easier to exploit. Integrity builds legitimacy, and legitimacy fosters peace. Leadership is a journey filled with challenges and triumphs. Reflecting on my own tenure, I did face numerous challenges, including corruption, rising debt levels, so on and so forth. But these experiences taught me that humility, listening, and continuous learning are the core to ethical leadership. Courage, my friends, courage is the underestimated quality, but it is something that you shall require in abundance if you are to transcend ethnic mobilization for power, short-term populism, and dependency on elite networks. Leadership should be based on vision and competence, not tribal affiliations. Policies should be designed for long-term national benefit, not immediate political gain. Opportunities should be accessible to all based on merit and hard work. Focused and determined is what you shall need to be in order to confront the status quo and compel a shift to a merit-based governance model that values competence over connections, transparency over transactional politics, and places citizens, not politicians, at the center of public service. Young leaders, as I conclude my remarks, I would like to recognize that universities like this are not just centers of learning, but they are incubators of change. They nurture values, ethics, and civic consciousness. You, as guild presidents and student leaders, are not merely representatives of your peers. You are the trustees of tomorrow's Africa. Your leadership today will shape the governance structures of our nations tomorrow. The power of an integrated East Africa lies in shared values, youth-led civic movements, and collaborative governance reforms. I encourage the creation of a cross-border youth action plan for integrity as outlined in your own summit agenda. You are the first true East African generation. Think beyond borders. Think vision. For you, your sake, and for the sake of future generations, my call to action for our youth is to lead with conviction, not convenience. To our institutions, I ask you, empower and equip these young leaders meaningfully with the skills and knowledge they need to actualize their potential. To the development partner present, it is my hope that you shall consciously invest in an integrity-driven leadership development. It is said that history is often written by the powerful, but the future will be shaped by the principle. I express hope in this generation's courage, creativity, and conscience. I reiterate support once again for the GPLA's mission and Makerere University's leadership in all of this. Let your voices rise not just as echoes of the past, but as my father said, as architects of a new dawn, an East Africa that works for all and leaves no one behind. I thank you all for your attention. May God bless you. May God bless our beautiful region of East Africa and our wonderful continent of Africa. Asante ni sana. Thank you very much.